In Uganda, the church has long held a significant place in society, with its influence often extending into the political arena, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly. Some religious leaders have boldly spoken out against corruption, human rights abuses, and poor governance. Yet the state often pushes back, accusing the church of overstepping its bounds and urging the clergy to stick to preaching. However, the line between moral leadership and political engagement remains blurry, as issues like poverty, justice, and equality are inherently political. Meanwhile, some politicians manipulate pliable church leaders to advance personal agendas, undermining the church's core mission of justice and societal upliftment, especially when those same politicians are key drivers of the very injustices they claim to oppose.
There are those who, of course, as the general society is, they've become opportunistic. There is a lot of opportunism in the church now, positioning themselves for benefits, packages from the church, positioning themselves for being able to access certain advantages from the state. And that's why they are quiet. And then there are those who are doing wrong things, glaring wrong things like exploiting people. And they know that the best way to cover those glaring wrongs, not for the state not to get to them, is to either remain quiet or simply do what the state wants.
Dr. Spire Ssentongo, a celebrated philosophy scholar and human rights activist, argues that while some church leaders have been able to stand their grounds and called out the excesses of their state, some have just voluntarily positioned themselves to benefit from the injustices and state-orchestrated atrocities meted against members of the public. These, he advised to return to the foundational teachings of the church.
Of course, the primary message would be for any religious leader in the circumstances is, what did Jesus stand for? What is it that they preach to us that Jesus came here for? Because they are talking about salvation. What did Jesus save us from? What did he come to save us from? They'll say to save us from sin. What is that sin? So if that sin involves things such as injustices, such as mistreating others, such as exploiting others, such as allowing others to suffer because of our own privileges, our exploitation, then why would a religious leader stand on the other side when all those things are happening? So a religious leader who is not able to stand with those who are suffering, while they are in church singing together with the people, whatsoever you do to the least of my brother, that you do unto me, that is just as Jesus often said, those are Pharisees, those are hypocrites. And in my view, they are just people who are taking advantage or hiding behind religion to simply be able to access other worldly things.
About the recently passed UPDF Amendment Act, which grants the court-martial authority to try civilians, Spire interprets as an outright move by the government to cheer on the military violating the rights of civilians, particularly at a time when the country is heating up to the uncertain political climate.
Yeah, to be able to assess that law, you would have to look at, first of all, the precedent, some of the things that were done by UPDF using that law, using court-martial before. Yes, there are disciplinary matters that were resolved in the army by using court-martial, and I think there is largely no problem with that. But then we also know there are many civilians who have been unjustly arrested, tortured, kept in incarceration for no reason. They have not been charged with anything, sometimes, or in a number of cases, for political reasons, wearing red overalls, something that is not really breaking any law. But because court-martial had the leverage of doing certain illegal things, performing certain illegalities behind the cover of pursuing justice in their own way, that's why they have been able to get away with it. So that such a law coming back, especially during elections, but also at a time where we see that the army is becoming more, that there is increased impunity in the army, that you have the head of the army boasting about torturing people, the head of the army threatening violence, threatening killing people, and you're equipping them with such a law that gives them a leeway to do those things. I think that is just to see a madman throwing stones and you collect more stones and put them there for them, even bigger.
It's upon this ground that he reminds the public, particularly those who deem it uncomfortable with the status quo, to take it upon themselves and explore all the available avenues to obtain justice and societal betterment.
Yeah, in all history of oppression, in all history of injustice, we know that justice has not been achieved on a silver platter. The oppressor has not simply considered at a certain point, say, okay, we have realized that it is wrong to oppress, therefore we are allowing you to, we are letting you be, we are letting you enjoy your rights. There is always a struggle. There is always effort at correcting those wrongs, even when times become so desperate, when all hope seems to be lost, that you make one achievement, then you take 3 steps back. It has to be a constant struggle. It has to be a constant effort in addressing those wrongs. Otherwise, our society, the way it is now, and some of the things we're enjoying, we wouldn't be enjoying them now if those before us had not also insisted on fighting some of the wrongs that were there before. So this is not an invitation to giving up, but an invitation to even building a stronger resolve to push harder, a stronger resolve to create a better society.
The Uganda People's Defence Forces Amendment Act 2025, passed on 20th last month, introduced multiple reforms to the military justice system, including the streamlining of veterans affairs, restructuring health services for armed forces personnel, and also the controversial authority to try civilians involved in military offenses in the court martial.